Good evening, everyone. Thank you, scholars, for joining on time. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, thank you for engaging with our channel. So today, without further ado, we are joined by the International Admissions Director at Washington and the University, Sarah Riggs. Washington and the University is one of only 10 need-blind universities for international applicants in the US. And it is currently ranked within the top 25 among liberal arts colleges in America. And one of our immediate past scholars, Senita Senaratne, is actually just getting acclimated and settled in over there this week. So we're really excited for Senita and also excited to have WNL engage with us this way. And so um, without taking much more time, I am glad to invite Sarah Riggs, who is going to talk to us a little bit about all the different types of writing that are involved in the American university application process, specifically for undergraduate applicants. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah.
Of course, and thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you all scholars so much for taking time out of your evening, out of your preparation for A-level exams during what I know is a very, very busy time for you. We are thrilled to be able to engage with the Strivers Network. We are thrilled to be welcoming one of your own to WNL at this exact moment. And we are really, really excited to be able to help you prepare applications, regardless of whether they are for us or not. Right? WNL is a school of just under 2,000 undergraduate students. It's a tiny place. It's not the right fit for everybody. That's why we're a tiny place, pretty intentionally. But we do love to be able to share and help and support students who are going through the US application process in general, but more broadly, and especially in the selective and highly selective admission space, which I know that all of you are applying to very selective institutions. And so hope that this messaging, though every institution is so specific and slightly different, that this presentation or the information that we talk about today will be helpful throughout your application preparation process, no matter where you land, no matter where you are headed. What we're going to do is talk a little bit about all kinds of writing in the application process. There is more than just the essay, as I'll say several times as during our time together today. And we're going to talk a little bit about all of the different types of writing. There is going to be a lot of information here. This is dense and text heavy as a presentation because it is about writing after all. I say all of this not to overwhelm you, and my goal of this presentation is not to overwhelm you either, but to arm you so that you feel prepared for all the different types of writing that you see, so that you begin to expect to see some of these spaces on your application and be able to write in these ways on your application so that you're not surprised when you see them and you're not overwhelmed when you see them. So again, a lot of information here today, but I hope that this will be preparatory rather than overwhelming. So let's dive right in. Okay, so in your application, your goal is to tell a cohesive and compelling story about who you are that authentically represents yourself and authentically represents who you are. Um, so we want to, as US institutions, especially selective US institutions, to understand not just that you are prepared for our environments, for our educational communities academically, but that you are the right fit, that we want to understand who you are and how you will fit in our campus communities. And really, throughout your application, writing is your primary way of communicating that to us. In all the different sections of your application, your written word is how you get to communicate that cohesive and compelling story. One thing that I think we don't talk about enough in US admission, when we talk about holistic admission, we say we look at everything, every piece matters. And that is true only after we verify your academic preparation, right? We are looking, academics are the baseline. We are reviewing academics as a starting point for review. And once we see that, yes, you are prepared, yes, you are academically competitive, then we start to look at all the other pieces. So, all of these written pieces of your application are what round it out when we have an academically competitive student who has applied. A thing you will hear over and over again, it's what the entire presentation is about, is that writing is everywhere. Yes, it is in your essay, but it is also in your activity descriptions, it's in supplements, it's in the emails that you're sending to us throughout your application process as well. So, writing is more than just your essay in the application process to the US. And we are looking for your human voice. We want you to be human. You are a person. You will make mistakes in your writing. You may misplace a punctuation. You may misspell a word. These are all things that are okay. We want you to be human and not be perfect. We want you to be authentic in your voice, and we also want you to use appropriate tone. What this means is that yes, we want you to be authentic, but remember who you're writing to. You are not writing to your best friend or your cousin. You're not writing to a a job employer either, right? This is not super, super professional writing, but it is also not very casual writing. We are looking for your personality and your voice, but you want to make sure that you are using an appropriate form of language, that you are using an appropriate tone in your communication as well. Human also means that we hope your writing is not AI generated fully. So I'll just take a second to share a little bit about AI in the space of support as a resource versus actually doing the writing for you. We at WNL have an AI policy on our admission website that gives you some guidance around what might be appropriate use and collaboration with AI in the application process and what might not, what might be an overstep. Some admission offices will share this, some will not. But I will just say where we stand, which is that AI can be a helpful collaborator and a helpful resource for you in the process. It should never be doing your writing. And I'll talk as we go along about some ways that you may want to collaborate. But the point being, we want to hear your voice. We don't want to hear Chat's voice or Claude's voice or Copilot's voice or whoever you're deciding to use. We don't want to hear their voice. We want to hear your voice. And so remember that human is good. We are looking for voice, not perfection. My biggest recommendation to everyone ahead of starting their writing in the college application process is to sit down and make a very long bullet point list that is incredibly comprehensive. All of the things that you would want an admission officer to know about you if you got to sit down and talk with them for an hour instead of submitting an application. What would you want to communicate with them? What would you want them to know about yourself? Write down absolutely everything you can possibly think of. Things like I am a good student, things like I am a responsible older sibling, things like this club or activity has been really important to me. I have been an impactful member of my community in this way. I have faced these challenges or hardships. This is a piece of my personality that I think is really important. These are my goals. This is what I hope to achieve. I'm not sure what I want to study, but here are some different areas that I think I may have an interest in. Everything you could possibly think of, nothing too trivial, nothing too large. And edit that list. This is a really good starting point and a reflection space. Um, Feel free as you go throughout this application process to edit it, add to it, take things off of it. But as you go through your application, your goal is to communicate as much as you can from that list to us in your application in various ways. So, for instance, I'm a good student. You're submitting a transcript to us, you're submitting your A level results to us, you're submitting, we're understanding which courses you took and how you're performing in those courses. So, you can cross that off the list. You don't necessarily need to spend your essay detailing your academic success to us again, unless there's a different piece of the process or piece of your puzzle that you can share with us in that way. Basically, I want you to hold on to this list and refer to it frequently throughout your application process. Because again, remember, your goal is to create a cohesive and compelling story throughout your application process. And your list can serve as a great jumping off point and a great continual reference point throughout the process for helping support that effort and that work. So where are we going to start? The essay. This is the main piece of writing. If you are completing the Common App, this is the Common App essay. This is about a 650 word, excuse me, not page, 650 word essay that is a personal narrative in your own voice. This is not a resume. This is not a repeat of information that we're seeing elsewhere in your application. This is an opportunity for you to share your voice with us. My advice for an essay is to be specific. Oftentimes, a more narrow focus can be much more compelling, can lead to a more interesting narrative than trying to be broad and fit that entire list we were just talking about into one essay. Instead, pick maybe one element or one story, a narrow focus, and share it with us there. It tends to be much more effective, much more detailed, much more vivid in those 650 words. We would encourage you to really, of course, spend time with this piece of writing. It sounds like you've got lots of essay writing workshops coming up, lots of opportunity to spend on this. And I encourage you to think about what's on your list as you're deciding what to write about and what on your list maybe are you not sharing with us in other elements of the application that can oftentimes lead to a great essay topic that's really additive and informative and helpful in review. And if you're feeling stuck, the Common App offers a longer list of prompts. It's not just one. And so I would encourage you to think about each prompt and generate one or two sentences in response to all seven of those prompts. And then see which one feels really inspiring to you, which one you want to share more about, which one feels like it is more exciting to you. And wherever you feel drawn, really lean into that topic, that prompt, and complete your writing exercise there. One thing that I will caution you on, and so we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about the main long form essay today because you have lots of weeks to do that in an upcoming format, is that a lot of students focus only on this main essay or fall into this idea or sense that the essay is really the writing that matters in the application. And yes, it does matter, but there are lots of other elements of writing in the application process that, depending on the specific application, may even be more important than the essay sometimes, or at least just as important. So don't think only about this one component. Don't think only about this one piece of writing. A mistake that can often happen is because students spend so much time crafting the essay, editing the essay, polishing and refining the essay, then they're throwing together other pieces of writing and they don't sound like your voice that we're hearing in the essay, right? That, again, cohesive and compelling. We want to see a consistent voice throughout your application. And so hopefully, the voice matches in all elements of writing as well. And so if you've spent a ton of time creating this super polished, beautiful essay, but not focus so much on the other pieces, there can be a disconnect in the application. So we want to reemphasize that, yes, the essay is important. You're about to spend a lot of weeks working on that as a group with the Strivers Network, but also remember that there are other elements of writing that we call you to put attention and care into as well. So let's talk about those. So, most US institutions that you're applying to are going to require some school-specific responses. And these are really a great element or great opportunity for you to demonstrate your own fit for each of these institutions. The most common institutionally specific question that you will see is the why WNL, the why any other university, the why us question. And this is a great moment for you to be able to highlight who you are, who the university is, and how you match well with each other. I would say that a strong supplemental essay for an institution specific does clearly demonstrate a two-way understanding. It demonstrates an understanding of self, an understanding of the place to which you are applying. And if you can think a little bit about how you and the institution to which you are applying overlap, whether that's mission statement, goal, campus community, academic program, culture, whatever you see as an important priority for you in your college search, and how that institution overlaps with that. Think thoroughly about that and then respond to that question. That exercise is going to elicit a much more compelling response to the kind of why us question. One thing we want you to think about there is how would you contribute in that space if you were on campus? Not just why the university is a fit for you, but why you are also a fit for that university, if that makes sense. So here is a really important piece of writing that sometimes, depending on the institution, depending on the specific student, a compelling why this university response can be much more impactful than that long form essay, depending on the specific circumstances when an institution is trying to match or build a really cohesive and compelling class, not just looking for cohesive, compelling students, but building a full, well-constructed class. You may also run into or encounter academic program, or major specific essays. There are some institutions who are not only going to ask you why us as a school, but why this specific major specifically, why this specific academic program. And this is an opportunity for you to really think through any past experiences you may have had related to that academic interest, and any future plans or future goals that you may have related to that academic experience as well. Again, not all schools are going to ask this, but some will, especially larger institutions where you are applying to a major specifically rather than to the institution as a whole. So the tone of that may be slightly different. Rather than personal reflection, it is personal academic reflection. And then there are some scholarships for some schools where if you are applying for a merit-based scholarship, you may be asked to complete a supplemental portion of writing for those scholarships. And these are often going to focus a little bit more on leadership, community impact, academic vision, and may carry separate deadlines as well. These are less about admission and more about scholarship, but you may see them reflected or in your own application journey, depending on where you are applying. Just to dive a little bit further into those scholarship or program specific or major specific essays, if there is, instead of just a short answer supplement, but rather a long essay that's asked for regarding scholarships or specific programs or entry into a particular, even more competitive program or academic interest. These will often be read by external committees, so maybe by the admission office, but also by additional people, maybe in the specific program, scholarship managers. Maybe there's an external committee that reviews initial applications for these. And so they may not necessarily be part of your general application for admission. And they are going to be, so do not make the mistake of uploading your Common App essay if you are asked for a second essay for something. Repetition of the same essay is not the move here. It is usually going to be somehow more forward looking and purpose driven. It may ask you to reflect on a particular reading that has been important to you or a particular work of art that has been important to you. It may ask you to think about your specific field and demonstrate kind of a depth of engagement in that field rather than just an eagerness to pursue it in college. And then, of course, we want to see when we're reading that kind of essay where you envision your life heading. We know that you have a lot of life ahead of you, and what you think now may not be where you end up. And especially at a liberal arts college like WNL, we hope that we introduce new things to you. And it's exciting to us if you don't end up where you thought you would because you found a brand new passion or a brand new path. But we do want to see as universities, if you're applying for even competitive programs or specific scholarships, that you have vision and foresight and forethought, that you have some sort of vision, even if that vision is exploratory in nature, that you have depth of experience and eagerness to enact that into a future plan as well. Okay, back to what we in the admission office are reading. These short answer questions are also usually going to be institutionally specific, especially if you're using the Common App. There are some kind of application platforms that might ask these short answer questions more broadly. I don't think any of you are using them. So these short answer questions will also be institutionally specific essay questions. These are, again, very, very short in nature, where depending on the institution that you're applying to, there may be 10 of these questions, there may be one. Oftentimes, there are 1 to 3, and you get to pick from a multitude of prompts and pick 2 or 3 to respond to. So it is very different in nature depending on which institution you're applying to. But the short answer questions are usually trying to understand your personality the most. This is where you get to show off a little bit of your own creativity, your own personality. These responses, in some instances, may be one word. There are some schools that are going to ask you for rapid fire, one word responses to a bunch of different questions. Then there are some institutions like us that are going to ask you to respond to one additional question that's through a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, but much shorter than the Common App essay itself was. Um, and these are really, really high impact, short responses, where again, we want you to be able to showcase your personality and your creativity. A lot of times, these topics are going to be about your own influences, your favorite, maybe favorite books or art pieces or ways to engage, about your own community, about your own perspective, experiences, identity that are not necessarily reflected through your activities. And maybe a ethical dilemma kind of question, or a what would you do in this scenario kind of question as well. Um, and then sometimes, like for us, I can think of a couple of our supplemental options where the questions are really going to reflect the personality of that institution and ask you to reflect on it as well. Um, for instance, one of our short answer questions is about your name and what you prefer to be called and the importance of your name, because that's related to our own speaking tradition at WNL, at Washington and Lee. So sometimes the questions are going to be reflective of who that institution is. And then some are just going to be very, very creative, allow you to show your kind of outside of the box thinking, and really you get to highlight your true, authentic voice here, especially in those very brief one word or one sentence responses as well. The short answer questions, these particular kind of more creative supplements, are oftentimes the responses that your admission officer is going to remember the most. They're a lot of times going to be the most memorable and the most relatable to them as well, the most kind of exciting to be able to read. Um, One other quick note here is that occasionally these short answer responses will allow you to respond not in writing, but in video form. And even if you are going to respond in video form, I do encourage you to include writing as part of that exercise by jotting down, sketching out what you might say. I do not mean write yourself a script and say that script, but go into that video response with a thoughtfulness, with a plan, and with a structure. In fact, I would say if you're going to write out a script, you may as well just submit that as a written response. The reason we would ask for a video is not to just hear you read words, but rather to see you engage and interact. And so again, that kind of authentic video response is exciting to us, but writing down or sketching out what you might want to say in that response can be helpful so that it is, again, cohesive and compelling rather than scattered. So, don't use a script is my point there if you're going to use a video response, but rather have a plan and make sure you're kind of sketching out what you want to talk through in that video response before you go for it. Okay, these are all of the places that are going to be what you think of traditionally as written components of the application. But there are other ways in which writing is important. So these are all of the ways that you're writing an essay, you're writing short answers, you're writing responses that are actually written components of the application. But all of the other elements of the application do require thoughtfulness about your writing as well. So, honors and awards, extracurricular activities. Um, your activities list is not just a list of the names of things that you participate in. We want you to think of this as a great opportunity where you can leverage your writing skills to really showcase who you are outside of the classroom and how you're making an impact in the community. So, how you're presenting each activity and your role in that activity, or how you're presenting the honors that you have received or the awards that you have received, is really important to us as well. So, there is some thoughtfulness surrounding how you are presenting this information rather than just jotting down the name and filling out a form. So, I want to talk to you about how you can actually use your writing or some strategy in completing this section that might bolster the strength of your application or help in telling that compelling and cohesive story that you're trying to tell. One is to just really be intentional about how you're listing what. So, if the story that you're trying to tell us, that we're seeing elsewhere in your writing, that we're seeing in your academic transcripts, that we're seeing in your community information and where you attend school and your family dynamic and the biographical information that you're sharing, if that story is about a particular community impact, a volunteer engagement, something that you have really done to serve your community, then when I look at that activities section, it's probably going to be more compelling, more impactful, hit a little bit harder if I see that volunteer or service or community impact activity listed first, right? Lead with the thing that fits as part of your compelling through line, your compelling story in your application. In other words, lead with whatever is most important to you. So list activities by their significance to you, not by the order in which you completed them. So, what is most important to you? List that first on your activities list because we're going to see that first. And human nature is that what we see first is what we believe you value the most. So be strategic and intentional about what you are writing down first in this section. And then do not just list the name of what you do, please. The name of the organization, the club, the activity, the honor, the award. Be really strategic about how you're using your character allotment to describe, name, explain what you do and what that thing is, especially. So, you do not, in this section, need to complete full sentences. You have very limited characters to express to us what you have done, what this activity is, and what your impact was, or what the honor was, what the award was, and why you received it, what the significance of that thing is. Here is a great example of a time it might be valuable and helpful to collaborate with AI, for example, where you are thinking about everything you would want us to know about that activity, what it is, what you did, what your impact was, what your responsibilities were, why you did it, why it was meaningful to you. And all of that information does not fit into the very, very limited character description section. Maybe that's a time that you input to AI. Here is like what I, into a generative AI system of some kind. Here is the information I want to communicate to someone in sentence form, in bullet form, whatever you'd like. And then ask it how it might um, cull that down to the 60 character limit or the 60 word limit or the whatever the limitation or restriction you have is. You can see what it shares back and then edit that accordingly. Decide what you like, throw out the suggestions you don't, and then move that into, do not copy paste, but I mean like really move that yourself into the Common App however you see best represents what you've done. So that's a really kind of responsible and helpful way that you might collaborate with a system where it's not doing the work, it's not taking over your voice, but it is using an efficiency, it is being pretty strategic and maximizing the space that you have to write and tell us about yourself, to communicate what it is you hope to communicate to us about something. And then we really hope that you are emphasizing your extraordinary accomplishments. If does not mean that everyone has to have incredible, extraordinary accomplishments. Everyone does have extraordinary accomplishments in their own way. But if there is something that an admission officer might not understand, but that really is like the most extraordinary, most impactful, best in country kind of moment, kind of experience, kind of accomplishment, please make sure that you are elevating its importance to us in that space, in the honors, the activities, awards, and again, utilizing those descriptors as best you can, utilizing the space to indicate to us how big of an accomplishment that is or how big of an important element it is to you. For instance, you might want to say one of 100 selected out of 10,000 applications or something like that. Use those quantifiers to help explain to us what that accomplishment was or what that achievement was. And then again, do not assume that an admission officer is going to know what the name of your club, like what your club does, just based off of its name, what your activity is. So especially if it's something that's unique to your school or your community, we're going to need to understand what it is in addition to where you are spending your time, where you are impactful in that space. And again, emphasizing the impact that you've had is really what we're after. We don't care if you fill that list out. We don't care, I mean, meaning that we don't care if you fill those 2 pages up. We don't care if you list 60 different activities where you show up once every 8 months. But if there are, we care more about what your impact was in the spaces where you are truly and meaningfully involved. It's about impact rather than volume in this space. Okay. And then additional explanations, things that you might not always need to share. So I will lead with the what are these sections not? These sections are not required for every applicant. Not every applicant has something that they need to tell us in their responsibilities section, in their challenges and circumstances section, in their additional information section. But if you do, please use it. If it's additive to your application, if it helps thinking back to that original comprehensive list you made at the beginning, if there are things that are really important to your compelling and cohesive story that are not included elsewhere in your application, this is a really great place to share them. This is not a second essay. This is not where you're gonna upload a resume or repeat activities. And again, this is not a requirement for every single student. However, um, if you need to share context or information that was not otherwise included, that is an important piece of that story you're painting for us, um, if we would wonder about something when we're reading your application and the answer is not included in your application, this is a great place to tell us those pieces of information. So, a lot of times, a student might tell us a little bit about um, a gap in an activity, a gap in a transcript, a gap in grading, a big grade miss, a big grade fluctuation, some kind of unusual circumstance in their home life, in their academic life, um, describing a really important piece of your personal context, or clarifying something unique to yourself that a reader would not otherwise understand. And then again, going back to that original list, important information that doesn't fit somewhere else. These are all appropriate uses of these challenges and circumstances and the additional information sections as well. And then one last explanation section that may not be relevant for everyone, but that you may see on your a need to complete on your application is this education progression explanation. This section is really, really important to us if throughout your schooling you did have some kind of interruption, or if you are currently on a gap year, or planning to have a gap year, something like that. We need clarity. The more clearly that you can communicate this information to us, why the interruption occurred or why the kind of atypical progression occurred, what you did in that break between progressions, what you're doing now if you're in a gap year, um, and kind of where you were going to school and where you're going to school now, if there's a school change that is atypical, that is not usual for your educational context. Clarity is the watchword for this section. Clarity and directness is important. You can think less about your unique voice here and just be very direct and very clear. An educational interruption or an atypical progression or a gap year, none of these things are bad things or alarming things. They would be bad things and alarming things if they were not clearly explained to us. So, again, be direct and clear in any kind of communication you have surrounding what may look like an atypical education progression for us. And then two other things that are writing in the application process that may not occur to you to be writing in the application process are any communications you're having with the admission office outside of your application. So if you're writing emails with the admission office, if you're having any other kind of communication with the admission office, not every institution does this, but a lot of schools are uploading each of those emails, each of those communications to your application. Not meaning that every single person who reads your application is reading every email that you've sent to the office, but it is attached to your record. So one, it sets the tone with the admission officer that you're communicating with, even separate to seeing it as part of your application. But additionally, further to that, some offices are actually attaching those communications. So, as part of reviewing your application, there's a whole section of every email you've ever traded. So, you want to, I'm not saying like write a super professional email every time you're sending an email. We know that that students who are applying are 17, 18, 19 years old, right? You do not need to sound like a a business executive. But we do want to ensure that you are being respectful in your tone, that you're using punctuation in your tone, and that your voice, again, matches across. If we have a curiosity about the authenticity of your writing, we could see how you sound in an email to us. Is that the voice that you're using elsewhere in your application and in your communications? So remember that those communications, though not typically or traditionally part of your application, may be connected and are certainly something that could be a consideration in the process. And then some schools may request supplemental items that are additional to those supplemental writing samples. Like some schools may allow you to or ask you to submit a graded writing sample that you have throughout high school or some kind of academic writing that you completed throughout high school. Some may ask for a portfolio of some kind, depending on which programs that you're applying to. And then you may be able to upload a resume as part of your application as well. All of these involve writing and preparation of those documents. And then finally, one piece of the writing that is not yours, but is an important part of your application is writing that others are doing on your behalf. Your recommendations coming from your school counselors or your Striver Network mentor and advisor or your teachers. We want to make sure that you are prepared to ask for this writing and set those recommenders up to best support you in your application. And so a few ways that you can do this are to request early, give your recommenders enough lead time. As you have seen and will continue to see throughout your workshops on your essays and over the next several months, that application preparation and especially writing takes time. And you want others writing about you to have time to support you well in your application too. So make sure that you're asking early. And then I think the other thing that it could be really impactful and important is to thoughtfully prepare them. And this may require some writing of your own. So a brag sheet, or basically a summary of your own achievements, activities, goals, things that you want to be communicated in those recommendation letters, things that you are working to communicate in your own application, going back to that kind of comprehensive list about yourself. What on it do you want for a counselor or a recommender or a teacher to help emphasize as well? You're not telling them, hey, here's what you have to write about me, but it does make their job a lot easier, a lot more straightforward, a lot simpler when they have some tools to help set up their letter for success. The one thing I will say about recommendations is that all admission officers care much more about what you have to say than what someone else has to say about you. If you are doing your job effectively as an applicant, you are communicating the most important things to us yourself. You are not leaving the most important things to someone else to communicate to us. So instead, that recommender serves to confirm what we already know about you and really enrich that picture that you've painted for us. So set them up well to support you in the process. And then in terms of teachers specifically, be strategic about who you're selecting. And the only strategy behind this is which teachers know you well. This does not have to be the courses where you are getting the highest marks or performing the best, but which teachers can speak to who you are as a student with the most authenticity and authority, who knows you best. And then, of course, don't forget to write to your recommenders to thank them for supporting your application as well. Okay, some takeaways here from this entire presentation, which I know is a lot of information. Really, if you remember nothing else, here are your kind of key takeaways. Writing is not just about the essay. It includes the essay, but is not limited to the essay. Start early because personal reflection takes a lot of time. And then researching each individual school that you're applying to takes time as well. And you want time to do those reflections. You want time to write and refine your writing in each element of the application as well. With that in mind, please edit your work. Don't ever submit your first draft without a read through out loud or a quick look through spell check, etc. But do not over edit your work. Edit, but do not over edit. Certainly, ask someone who knows you well, ask a trusted advisor for feedback. But please do not lose your own voice in the process. We do not want you to polish away your personality, right? That's important to us that you don't over edit to sanitize your writing. One really good way to go about the editing process is to read that essay out loud, or read the piece of writing you've written out loud, or to ask someone else to read it out loud to you so that you can hear it and hear if it sounds like your voice and what you were intending to communicate. Prioritize your own authenticity. So, as you're reading that out loud, or as a trusted advisor is reading that out loud to you, think about whether or not someone else could have written it. Ask your advisors, ask your friends if someone else could have written it as well. And make sure that your voice and your authenticity is represented there. And then just a great strategic approach, because again, this is a lot of writing. This is a lot of individual things to consider, especially when you're applying to, 10 different institutions or more. We want you to think effectively about the schools to which you are applying. There are schools that are going to be on your list because you have priorities in your search, places that you're interested in because of certain characteristics or qualities of the institution. And so, seemingly, there will be some overlap of the schools on your list in terms of characteristics and qualities. So, in order to maximize your own efficiency in writing, look for overlapping themes or features or characteristics across schools, and then really craft a why us essay for all of the schools that you're applying to. Like if you had to apply to every single school with the same why us essay, give a framework there. And then you can use that to adapt it and tweak it a little bit more specifically for each individual school rather than starting from scratch each time you're crafting that essay. Additionally, if there are supplemental essays or those short answer questions that have overlapping themes across institutions, you can take a similar approach there. Just be sure you are never copying and pasting your answers, because there's nothing worse in the world than reading a why this institution response and seeing another institution's name listed there. So do not copy and paste, and make sure you're always listing the right institution in the why that institution or in their short answer questions as well. And then truly, truly the last point about all of this writing, about this entire application process, about the idea of holistic admission and bragging about yourself and painting a picture and talking a lot about yourself, especially coming from a culture and a background in a community that is oftentimes more other focused, a little bit more outwardly focused, to turn the attention inward, I know is a tough exercise. This is a tough exercise for students who grew up in the US. This is a tough exercise for students who come from this educational culture and expect to be applying to US universities their whole educational lives, secondary school lives. So, one, we acknowledge that it is a long journey, this process, but it is a process of real self-discovery, of filtering through what others think, of what others want, and really distilling down who you are right now at this moment in your life, who you think you want to become. What are your goals, your values, your priorities? What are priorities for you in the institution or in the place that you hope to select or land? And so the idea of viewing this application process as a journey to sense of self and self-discovery is so, so valuable, even beyond your results, beyond where you go and where you get in. And so, starting even from the very beginning with that list you're making, all the way through the final product that you submit, try to view this process as a reward in and of itself rather than just thinking about the outcome. So, thank you all so, so much. I'm very happy to take any questions that anybody has, but I appreciate your time today and this evening. And good luck as you get started in your essay writing journey and all the writing that comes with your application.
Thank you so much, Sarah. As you promised, it was a very informative and dense presentation. So while we give our scholars a couple minutes to kind of digest all that good information that you just gave us, I especially appreciated what you said at the end about like how this process is an end to itself and not like a means. Well, it is a means to an end, obviously, but like can also be like viewed as an end to itself. And like I remember where like I remember feeling that way like after like my own application process 5 years ago. But then I had like some doubt as to whether that was just like survivorship bias. I remember like telling that exact same thing to like other people and then just saying like, oh, that you're just saying that because you got in. And so like I guess there's an aspect of that, but like over the past 5 years, like running the Strivers Network, we've spoken to like we generally like have a kind of a post-mortem, like, post mentorship program sort of like debrief with them. And like even like the scholars who unfortunately weren't able to like get in, get a full scholarship that enabled them to attend the university in America. Something that really stuck with them was this component of like reflection and introspection, that like as you already pointed out, like is not like something that we are encouraged to do as students in Sri Lanka. So on that point, I so you spoke a lot about like the what and the how of like writing in the application process. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the why about it all, specifically like beyond like just about holistic admissions, but like this whole philosophy of like very introspective thinking and like reflection. Well, to just kind of like contrasted with like UK universities, for example. Most of our scholars are applying there as well. Just to kind of contrast between the two systems. Whereas like in the UK, like it's much more like low level and like subject knowledge based and academic. The almost the entire application is specifically about like what degree you're applying to in these universities and why you're applying to and whether you're prepared for these degrees. Um, Like we are, since we have a British patterned education in Sri Lanka, we are generally culturally much more acclimated to that sort of thinking. Whereas in the US, it's much more high level, much more reflective. I think some terms that I took away from like your presentation were like authenticity, community, identity. So I just wanted your take on why these high level concepts in terms of like how an applicant thinks, how they interact with people, why those things matter to them. Because I see like going through the supplemental prompts, even offered by WNL, they're very much like reflected in that as well, like how you relate to a piece of art, for example. Any advice and insight you have about that?
Yeah, I'll say two things. One, from our perspective, we are much more concerned about your why, which is, I think, why we care about your writing in this way. And what I mean by that is, like, even down to extracurriculars activities list. Again, we care much less about what you are doing and much more about why you're doing it. That's shown through things like where your impact is coming from, what your responsibilities are. And you get to tell your why in all of your writing. We are looking for your identity, your personality, yourself. And why we are doing that is the idea of academic preparation is just, again, opens the door. It is the foundation, it is the bedrock of our review process. But then what we are trying to do, especially in the highly selective US institutions and universities, but really all US universities, and I'll say even further in the small liberal arts spaces or in the smaller US universities, we are really trying to create a community of learners from different backgrounds, different experiences, different personality traits, different interests, to craft an environment that is going to be interesting to all learners, and allow everyone to learn from each other, grow from each other, and avoid kind of sameness of thought, because that's where we think you really, really grow, and learn the most. So the why for us is that we are asking for your why so that we can really start to understand and put together a picture of who you would be on our campus, how you would fit in, where you would make an impact on campus to really develop and create a well-rounded community. We want a well-rounded community, but that doesn't mean that we have a community of well-rounded people, right? Like, yeah, we might have some well-rounded people, but some people who are really focused or really interested in a few things, that ultimately together create a well-rounded community. The other piece of that, so we're looking to see how and where you'd fit on our campus is why in one aspect. But then the other why, the why us especially question, why we're asking that is we do, as universities, have specific institutional priorities, specific campus cultures, specific identities as universities. And we do want to make sure that we are a fit for each other, that you're a fit for us, we're a fit for you. And so the why is, in addition to building and shaping that dynamic and very diverse community and campus culture, is, for instance, at WNL, all of our students have a through line and a connection and a commitment, despite how different everyone is, a connection and a commitment to the honor system, the idea of integrity and civility, but also the speaking tradition. Everyone who comes to WNL is ready to engage and look up and talk to each other. And those are institutional specific ideals that would be commonalities across all of our students. So we're looking for the right commonalities, but also the right individual differences, which is the why on our end.
Thanks, Sarah. I do have a couple other questions, but I do really want to open the floor to the scholars for you all to ask any questions that you have for Sarah. It would be great if it's like related to the presentation, but anything about like WNS specifically as well, I'm guessing would be all right. And yeah.
I have a question, Sarah, for you. It's actually regarding the application process and the selection process. So you said that the academics and the academic report and the transcripts are the baseline of the selection process. So beyond that, when you're like reviewing through like applications and then you have selected a specific set to be like taken to the next stage, like when you're present, like I take it that you have admission committee, right? So when you're presenting potential applicants to the committee, like do you have like a format or what do you focus on? Like, are there any specific things that you like want to point out when you're presenting it? And
And
I'd
that's,
like to know
I
what
think
they are.
that's such an astute question. It's such a keen question of like how our process works. Yeah, we're moving students forward basically through each stage of this review process. Um, the real difficulty about holistic admission. A lot of people are like, we be more transparent. Like, we are, this is the most transparent, is that it is difficult to explain because of holistic admission. Each applicant um, has different factors that are the most exciting to the admission committee. And so, what we're doing when we go to the committee and present or talk or advocate in front of the committee is present the most exciting and the most right fit elements about that student, which means, like, for you, it might come from your essay. From somebody else, it might come from their YWNL. From somebody else, it might come from their activities list or an honor or award they received. For somebody else, it may be a really, really interesting short answer perspective or take. All of this to say, everyone who gets there has a really strong academic foundation, and all the other elements matter so much differently for each student because each student has a different story to tell. But what I'm always going to center that conversation in is what is your story, your overall overarching story. So, this student is from this place and they are really blank, blank, blank. And I'll put in three adjectives to describe what I've learned from them about their story. And then I'll point out what is the kind of really exciting, really compelling piece of this application that means that we think this year they're the right fit as part of this group. So I know that it's difficult because it is not an answer, but that's the tough part about holistic admission is that is the answer. It's going to look different for every single student. But shaping that, again, cohesive story helps us set up kind of the descriptor, the adjectives. We start to see like what are your character strengths? What's consistent coming up throughout this application in multiple places, even if you're not telling us the same thing three times, we can see your perseverance show up in three different spaces, or we can see your commitment to community show up in three different spaces or whatever your intellectual curiosity show up across your application. So we'll pull those kind of adjectives based on what we've learned from you from your story.
All right, thank you. That clears a lot of questions actually. Thank you.
Yeah, hello Sarah. I wanted to know, like, you guys obviously have read like a lot of essays from different students all over the world. So I wanted to ask, like, how to balance between a story and also the self-reflection. And in the most successful essays, how do you think the students manage to do, like, provide the story as well as the reflection part?
Yeah, I think it's probably what you're going to be working on for a lot of essay workshops coming up too. But to me, the most successful essays are not big life events or huge stories. Not everyone has some huge story to tell, and that's okay. Like if you have a big life event, you really want to talk about it in your essay. This isn't me saying don't do that. Um, but it is me saying you don't need some huge story to tell. Sometimes the simplest things are the most effective. One of the most memorable essays I ever read was about this student shampoo, which is very, very simple, very like day to day. This is what the smell of this shampoo when she was washing her hair reminded her of her grandmother for this reason, and reminded her of a specific day in her life, and she told the story of that for this reason. And this is about like the memories that the smell elicited from her, and that was really impactful. She took like shampoo and told a story about herself and her life. And so, like, anchoring it around something seemingly simple or small or narrowly focused, like shampoo, is really effective in helping. Now, I don't want you all to write essays about the shampoo that you use. That's not what I'm saying. But, like, find whatever that is for you. It doesn't have to be big, tremendous, extraordinary. It can be absolutely ordinary. What is important in your day-to-day life to communicate what's important to you that we don't know elsewhere, whether that's relationships or a value or a question or a curiosity you have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. That cleared up everything I wanted to know. Thank you.
Um, this kind of related to what you were alluding to about like building a well-rounded class rather than admitting 500 well-rounded students. So the question of like depth versus breadth is something that we deal with every year because others tend to be like across the spectrum between like specializing in like the math Olympiad and they've gone to kind of the frontier of that as far as Sri Lanka has gone, but like that's kind of that thing. Whereas we also have scholars who kind of like wanted to do everything at school and did do everything at school and like did well in like, some of them as well. So like we have a bunch, like we have a kind of an array. So I guess like the answer for this like would depend on like whether like depend on their profile, but like just tying back to the topic of today's conversation about like the different aspects, different components of writing. Um, would you say that like all the different components in the application, not just the writing, but also like everything else, would you say that it would be best for all of those to like converge toward like a focal point or like some sort of common thread that it's best for them to figure out, or would it also be all right to kind of like diverge into like, hey, like I love Olympiad, but I also love like playing the piano, and I play the piano with my family, and like I also do this and also do that, like so yeah.
Yeah, completely. I think when we say kind of like cohesive or through line, we mean about identity and less about activity or specific interest. So, in that example, like a depth of commitment to Math Olympiad and depth of commitment to playing piano and depth of commitment to strong relationships with family shows a sense of intellectual curiosity, and community, right? Those are the through lines. So it's less about um, it's less about like you have to have one thing and only do that thing and be great in that thing. But what are we learning about who you are through what you're telling us in your application? And so the through line is again a little bit more like identity based, character strengths, personal qualities, as opposed to wrapped up in an activity or an accomplishment. That's not to say that we don't have well-rounded students on campus. We do, but usually a student is leaning into one or two or maybe three things and not eight things when we ask them what was the most important thing to you throughout your secondary school experience. Sure, there are probably some students on campus that were leaning really hard into eight things, but it's more like if you're involved in 15 different clubs or organizations, I don't really need you to tell me about all of those. I really need you to tell me about the things where you had an impact or the things where you were learning a lot, the things that were important to you and you were important to as well. Um, but if those are disparate things, if the things that are really important to you are different, that's okay. But what was your role in each of those spaces? And maybe that's where we're finding the through line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think tying into like Narmada's question as well about like the admission process.
Mhm.
Obviously, I don't know if this is like 100% true, but like something that we tell our scholars is like, admissions officers like they read like dozens and dozens of applications a day, and like they would have like only a short amount of time for each application, and so it's important that like the application doesn't like bodes itself well for like the admissions officer being able to like advocate for that applicant in a concise manner when it comes to committees.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Anyone else has any questions for Sarah?
Hi, Sarah. I wanted to ask you a question. I guess this is sort of related to fit on of students on campus. I read on your website that you guys really encourage students to organize events on campus. And I want to ask you, like, were there any specific events, like student organized events that you thought was really impactful and showcased WNL's values that made you think it's great that we accepted these students onto our
Yeah,
class?
that's a great question. I think there are things happening across campus all the time. It's a really active place. I think you'll find that in a lot of small liberal arts residential college settings that um, there's just always something happening. And especially at WNL, I've never seen such engaged students. There's a lot happening across campus all the time. But one example of that kind of activity is like we do something at WNL called MockCon, which is mock convention, which is every 4 years ahead of a US presidential election, our student body will organize a mock political convention to to try to determine who the opposing political party's presidential nominee will be for that upcoming election cycle. And it is entirely student run, entirely student driven, entirely student organized. So there are huge political figures that are coming to campus throughout that time, and our students are the ones responsible for interviewing them. Our students are responsible for putting together the parade. There's a big parade in town around that event as well. And so I think every time we see a student who is like interviewing someone during MockCon or like getting up to give the opening address at MockCon or driving the decorated car down the road for part of the parade for MockCon. It's like, oh, we're so glad we admitted this student. Life wouldn't be the same without them. So that's, I think, one huge kind of galvanizing event. But I think that all the time. Like we have a current student who this is an event this is not an event, but she is a cheerleader for our basketball team. She's like on the cheerleading team. And I just think it's so cool. Like she did not come from a background where there were cheerleaders at her school. And like now you're cheering for a Division III collegiate level athletic team. And it just makes me so excited to see. And that's not to mention anything about the professional achievements and the career accomplishments that our graduates go on to do that make me really proud and excited. It's just those little things of like, oh, here's one simple way that you're enjoying life on campus, and really making an impact here. And it seems simple and small. But that is a time where I look at a student, I'm like, yeah, they're really enjoying their time here. And that makes me excited that they came and are really engaging in things that we wouldn't have even anticipated from reading her application, but like definitely see a way that the campus has been good for her and she's been good for campus.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm wondering, I don't want to oversay like, your availability. I'm wondering how much more time you have because I noted that you mentioned you're available until I think 10 a.m. But
Yeah,
I just want.
I do need to go to another meeting, but I've let them know that I'm running a little bit late. So if we have
Oh,
time for
okay.
another question or two, happy to take it. But if nobody else has any questions, that's okay too.
Oh, okay. We all really appreciate it, Sarah.
Of
I
course.
have a technical question that will be um relevant to most of our scholars this year. So most of them have already finished their A levels, like it was last year, like between like mid-November. It was supposed to end in December, but there was a natural
Mm,
disaster and like there was a postponement and it ended in January. So technically they would go as gap year applicants. But I'm wondering because I noticed that there's a educational progression
mhm.
statement that they would have to fill out of like 250 words. So I'm would you get to like have your advice on like how they can articulate all of that because it would have been impossible for them to apply last year like in
Yeah.
the thick of A-levels just given how kind of intense the whole exam is. So this year was kind of their chance. So how would the best way be to articulate
Yeah,
all
I mean,
that?
I think just articulating it exactly as that, like as direct and concise as you can be, because of when A levels took place. Th this is, though kind of in a half gap year, this is the typical progression that's available to me. And then to share a little bit maybe about what they've been doing because there will be two sections. There's the educational progression section, and then there's the like basically, are you in a gap year section? And you can explain there like what you've been doing since school ended or since completing your A levels, basically. Gives you a little bit more space to write those answers.
Thanks. Yeah, that was insightful. Anyone else has any questions for Sarah before we wrap up?
I do have a question, sir. When it comes to our common up essay or other supplemental writings that we do, like, do you prefer a more straightforward writing style or a much more creative one?
I think it's down to you and your voice. There are some students who have that kind of more creative writing approach and writing style, and it works really well for them. And then others who take a more direct approach because that is their nature and their voice. I would just say, for those of you who tend towards a more creative style of writing, don't lose the forest for the trees, or don't like miss your point by trying to have flair. If as long as you're communicating your idea, your voice, your personality, what you're trying to say to us effectively, be as creative as you'd like, but don't be so creative that we don't understand what you're trying to tell us. That's really, really important. Like, don't try to write your whole essay in poetic iambic pentameter and then not be able to tell us the actual point of your story because you had to find the right syllabic or rhyming word there. So yeah, creativity is certainly welcome if that's your voice. It is not a requirement. But if you are being creative, be careful that ask someone what they think you're trying to say and make sure it aligns with what you really are trying to say before you submit it.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me.
So, yes,
Uh,
Sudita, go ahead.
my question is about application process. Are there any mistakes we should avoid which influence to the application process? I mean, all the universities in USA have a very low acceptance rate. I know it's competitive, but there are many applications that are getting ignored because of some mistakes. Are there such mistakes we should avoid during the application process?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the mistakes is just like, one, if something is optional, like if there is an optional supplemental question or essay, you should be doing it. So a mistake is like seeing something as optional and not doing it in terms of writing, in terms of things that are of no cost to you. There are maybe some optional supplements that have a lot of cost to them, and that's one thing. But like an optional essay, optional supplement, optional short answer question, if you don't do it in a highly selective, highly competitive place, that may be taken as a lack of interest. So do everything that's available to you within reason. And then like, I think you're doing the right thing. You're going to avoid some of those common mistakes just by being here, right? Like, a mistake is not focusing on all the other elements of your writing, of only thinking about your main essay. Well, you're not going to do that because you weren't going to do it anyway. And now you're definitely not going to do it because we've talked about that mistake here. So I think a mistake could be a very lopsided tone of voice because you're spending so much time polishing an essay and no time polishing your other writing. But definitely a big and easy mistake that we do see pretty commonly are students who just aren't doing that second supplemental question that is optional for us, but we would kind of take it as a sign of low interest or no interest.
Thank you, Udita. Anyone else has any questions before we wrap up and let Sarah go because she has a busy day ahead of her? Yeah, I guess
Well,
that's yeah.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your time this evening, and good luck writing your exams for those of you who are, and for writing your applications as you go through this process too.
Thank you for your time, Sarah. We'll definitely be in touch, and thank you all for joining.